All right, well, welcome everyone. This new board member series is going to talk about government relations. I am Jennifer Smith, your Director of Government Relations, and with me are some of my team members. We'll tell you a little about ourselves and then we'll get into what GR does and is. But I am the director. I've been Director of Government Relations for about 10 years now. And I've been with MASB since 2012. Before that, I worked in lots of legislative offices in the Senate and the House for many years. So I brought all of that experience and cynicism with me to this position. And then with me today is Liz Cook. And Liz, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Liz. I joined MASB in 2023. I primarily work with Jen in government relations. I do also work with two of our other departments, legal and leadership. Um, and I do various things with various different classes and programs. So
And Brenda has something come up unexpectedly. We're hoping she'll be able to join us so you can meet her as we go. But she's been with MASB for almost 2 years now. We stole her out of the Senate. And prior to that, she's worked for a lot of different nonprofits, including the American Cancer Society and the Community Action Agency down in Jackson. So we're excited to have her part of the team. And her anniversary, 2-year anniversary is coming up in June. So what do? We do a lot of things, but we tried to sum it up in just a few little bullet points for you. One of the biggest things we do internally is we're the staff support for the Government Relations and the Resolutions and Bylaws Committee. We'll explain those committees a little bit more as we go. But Government Relations meets every month to talk about legislation. Resolutions and Bylaws meets about 3 times a year, and we look at the resolutions and bylaws for the organization. We facilitate legislative priority setting. We do that every other year. So every election year, we reset our priorities for the incoming session. We give lots of legislative updates, teach classes on all of these things. We're always willing to come out and give a legislative update. We like to keep people informed, and the more informed you are, the more involved you'll get. We do a News from the Capitol newsletter, an email newsletter every week that the legislature is in session. So you probably won't get one this week. You should have gotten one 2 weeks ago. If you don't think you're getting them, please let us know and we'll double check. Our system is separate from your membership system. So sometimes there's a lag in getting everybody into our system. But those come out weekly. You can expect the next one probably next Friday. Views from the Capitol is a webinar that we do about 3 times a year on various topics and sometimes a little bit more if we need to. And the behind the scenes at the Capitol is our lobby day. We have one coming up on May 7th, and that one is in Lansing. And we try to hold those at least once a year, probably twice a year. But mainly what we do is represent you and your interests at the state capitol with the legislature and with US Congress. And at this point, we're getting a lot more federal work than we used to. But that is our biggest job, is to represent all of you with our lawmakers, making sure your voices are heard, your concerns, your supports, all of those things. So for the MASB committees, as I mentioned, the Government Relations and Resolutions and Bylaws, those committees are assigned for 1-year terms each August, and you can serve 3 1-year terms in a row. We do our best to make sure that those committees are spread out geographically and by type of district so that a committee isn't completely made up of small districts and no big ones. We want urban, rural, suburban, and we want those different sizes and from all over the state. So we work really hard to try to do that. And if you're interested in being on one of these committees, you'll find information will start coming out probably later this month in Dashboard and News from the Capitol, calling for people who want to serve. You simply have to let us know that you want to serve and what committee you'd like to serve on. And then we start putting our committees together to be approved by the board in July. There are 3 member committees, the Government Relations one that we cover most of, Resolutions and Bylaws, which is a driving force for the organization. And then the Legal Trust Fund is run by our legal department and Brad Banasic. That is a fund that if a school is involved in a lawsuit, that we think could affect public education across the state, they can apply to this fund for extra support and extra resources in order to be able to follow that lawsuit. The website at the bottom is where you can find all of those committees and more about them. So the Government Relations Committee this year, we have 24 members. They serve from August of 2024 to July of 2025. As I mentioned, we choose from all different types of districts in all areas of the state. We actually have a little chart we use every year to fill in to make sure that we are as balanced as possible, because all of those different voices matter. This committee gets together and talks about legislation that's coming up in Lansing or in DC to determine what MASB's position is. So the more diverse the voices, the stronger our position is. So we go through that. We go through all the people who apply and try to make sure that we have a balanced committee. Someone from the same board can't serve on the same committee. We make, very good sure of that. We also, in the Government Relations Committee, as I mentioned, we meet monthly when the legislature is in session. We take action on bills that are pending or moving through the system, but we also talk about other upcoming issues or things that we think might be coming to give us an idea as your lobbyists, how to approach that. As we know people are trying to draft legislation, what input can we give them before it ever gets introduced? So all of that happens in these government relations committees. And then it's also a way for all of you to be involved, but also to then feed back to your member districts, to the districts you live in, your ISDs, your COSBAs, some of the things that are going on at MASB. The Resolutions and Bylaws Committee is small this year. We unfortunately lost about 4 people as we went through the elections. So we have 13 members serving this year. We meet early in the year to go through resolution by resolution to take a look at them and decide, do they need to be updated, removed, completely rewritten, or left alone? Most of them get left alone because they are just timeless resolutions that we believe in. Individual school boards can also adopt proposals in their board meetings and send them to the committee. All of those are due by July 25th this year in order to have them in time for the delegate assembly. And then when we go to the delegate assembly, all of the changes that were made by the committee, all the new resolutions and any changes to bylaws are presented to the delegate assembly for votes at that annual meeting. We also set the agenda and the rules, which really generally don't change from year to year. Sometimes they get clarified, but the rules remain the same. But we put all of that together with that Resolutions and Bylaws Committee as well. And then after delegate assembly, which this year is in October, the new R&B committee will meet in February, and we do the process all over again. So all of these things get reviewed annually and by different sets of eyes. So as I mentioned, the delegate assembly is going to be held October 23rd this year. This is part of our annual leadership conference. It is the annual meeting of our members that is required for a 501c3. Each district figures out who their delegates should be. That is an actual roll call vote at your board meeting. Those get submitted to us. We keep track of them, and then we make sure that the right people are there to vote when we get to that night. Generally, the night starts with remarks from our current president, our executive director, possibly the past president. There's a brief legislative update that night. And then we move into the meat of the delegate assembly, which is all the work the Resolutions and Bylaws Committee has put forth. So we go through the resolutions that changes have been made to allow debate on the floor, allow amendments if necessary or if wanted, and vote on each individual one as we go through. It normally lasts about an hour and a half. We've been trying to keep it there. It just depends on how many votes there are and how much discussion there is. So we never really know exactly how long it's going to be. But we start at 7 o'clock the night before the annual leadership conference. And then we wrap up that evening with a welcome reception in our exhibit hall. So there's a nice way to unwind after sitting there listening to all of the debate for an hour or so. So our legislative priority setting, we actually just did last year. We held 10 meetings across the state in September, October, and I think we had 1 in November. We hold one in each region, each MASB region, and then one each in Oakland, Wayne, and Macomb counties, just because of population. The one that we do in Region 1, we have been really lucky the last few years that every ISD in the Upper Peninsula has acted as a remote site. So we've had great participation without them having to drive forever to get to wherever our site may be. Because while it's a beautiful drive, it's a long drive. So we try to make things as easy as possible. But we bring them all in. We invite all of our board members. They're welcome to bring their superintendents. And we brainstorm with them. We want to hear, what do you want to see changed? What do you want to see fixed or implemented or repealed? And we put all of those ideas that we collect at those 10 meetings. They get put into a survey. And then that survey is divided by 4 different topics. Generally, it's things like governance, student supports and curriculum, finances, and infrastructure, I think, has been a big one. So we divide all the brainstormed ideas into those. We send them back out to all of our membership and say, here's your ideas. Now, under each of these 4 things, pick the top 3 that are most important. So then we get the survey results back in the beginning of December. We weed through them, pull out the things that have risen to the top of each of the sections into the survey in general, and we take those to our government relations committee. They whittle them down, combine them, change them, however they see fit, to keep the same ideas, but make them into more priority statements. And then that goes to our board of directors for approval in January. So this sets the legislative priorities for the upcoming session. So we did it in 2024 for this 25-26 session. Some of our priorities, they're all, I think Larissa put the link in the chat, so you can read them all, but a lot of them you'll find are funding related. This funding is always a big thing when we're talking to all of you in the field. Specifically, we talked a lot about mental health and safety funding. This was surprisingly cut last year, and so they wanted to make sure that we would continue to make this a priority, not only for us, but for the legislature. There's a lot of talk about infrastructure. Michigan is one of only 7 states that doesn't support infrastructure with state funds. We're hoping to change that this year, and that is one of our priorities, is to do that. And of course, we always talk about an equitable funding system and specifying that universities do not belong in the school aid fund. That is a much touchier subject. We may actually get some traction on that this year. But that is one that has been an ongoing priority since 2010, when the first money went to community colleges, getting higher ed out of the school aid fund, protecting that school aid fund from things that are not public education has been a priority forever. On some of the policy side, we talked about standardized testing, and we need to really step back and take a look at how and when we test our kids and how often. One of the things we're really hoping to get movement on this year with assessments is removing the mandate on ACT work keys and making that an optional test for the students who want to take it instead of every 11th grader. And removing the essay from the SAT. We're the only state that still does that. The College Board doesn't support it. There's really no reason for Michigan to keep doing it. So those are 2 of the things that we think are low-hanging fruit. We might actually be able to get movement on, and it would make a huge difference to our 11th graders. But part of our priority also is looking at the M-STEP and either updating it or replacing it. And how do we do that? And that's going to be a longer project, but something we've heard about for a long time. Nobody likes the M-STEP. Kids, teachers, districts, nobody likes it. So what do we do about it? The one catch is that the federal government requires under ESSA for us to have a summative assessment, and it has to be approved by the department. And M-STEP is that assessment for us. So even if Michigan makes the change, it has to be approved by the federal government. So this isn't something that's going to happen overnight, but if we can start the work on it, get the attention drawn to it, maybe we can get somewhere in the next few years. We also want to look at state-based programs and certification of all educational staff. We've seen a lot of steps in the school budget to help build the teacher pipeline. Now we want to look at support staff, bus drivers, parapros, things like that, where districts are hurting all over. And if we can find different ways to get more people to want to be education staff, that would be great. And how do we incentivize that? And then finally, another one that has been ongoing for a long time is putting the charter school education management organizations that run them on equal playing field with traditional districts. So charter schools are public schools. They follow all the same rules, all the same laws. The difference is the EMO is a contract. And so the public school academy, the charter school budget will say contracted services, and that money flows out to the education management organization who doesn't have to open their books, who doesn't have to say how they're spending their money, what they pay their staff, or any of that. That's what we're trying to work on. So that's just a highlight of the priorities that we set this year that we'll be working on throughout the year. There's always other things that people are like, but this is really important. So don't think that if it's not on our priority list, it's not something we're working on. These are just things we want to highlight with the legislature among all the other things we're working on with them. So what do we do for you? A lot of it is these sorts of things downtown. So we testify in committee hearings on pertinent legislation, especially if it's one of our legislative priorities, if it's something the committee felt really strongly about, if it's something that's in our resolutions that says, MASB believes this, then we want to make sure that the committee and the public know that. We also, instead of necessarily orally testifying, we will turn in written testimony. And a lot of times when we do that, it's with a group. So instead of 6 of us going up to testify, we'll put together a memo with all of our concerns, all of our logos and names, and say, we all feel this way from the education community. So a lot of our written testimony is because we're doing it in collaboration with others. We also work with bill sponsors and committee chairs and others on changes that we want to see. Or there are times that people will send us a bill and say, hey, I'm thinking about introducing this. What do you think? And that gives us a chance to work with them before the bill is introduced, which is a much easier time to make changes. Or once the bill is introduced, we can take our suggestions from the committee, from experience to say, this is what would make your legislation better or functional, because a lot of times the people drafting these bills have not been in schools. They've never worked education on the ground. And so it sounds like a great idea, but then it's our job to walk in and say, logistically, this doesn't work the way you think it does. And so that's a lot of what we do, is working with those bill sponsors and committee members to say, I understand what you're trying to do, but if you want to do it, you got to think about X, Y, and Z. We also, for sure, walk in and say, we understand what you're trying to do, and we don't like it. That happens too. And there are just times that it's an issue that we don't have a place to go to move to. But more often than not, we try to work with people to get a bill into a place where we don't oppose it. So we also keep you informed and invite you to get involved. So this is a couple of examples of what we'll send. So News from the Capitol is that weekly newsletter that I mentioned in the beginning. March 28th is the last time this came out. As I mentioned, I don't think it'll come out this week because the legislature isn't really doing anything, but it probably will next week. And what we try to do in that is highlight some of the big things that happened that week that affect schools or that you may be interested in. We make sure that all of the blurbs about those include bill numbers and information that you can go look it up too if you want more than what we have. And of course, you can always reach out and say, I read this article, but I'm missing something. Can you tell me more about it? The other picture that's on there is our advocacy website, and we run that through Voter Voice. That is linked on our main MASB site to get to it through state activities and through advocacy, I think is what it says. But what we'll do there is we highlight what's going on right now. So the 25-26 school aid budget, that's the governor's proposal that she gave in the beginning of February. We will update that as the House and Senate pass their proposals to show the differences. And then, of course, our legislative priorities are up there. If we had a bill that we had contacted you and wanted you to take action on, that would be there as well. And then if you see to the right under blog posts, that is every news from the Capitol for this session. So those will stay up there for 2 years. So if you ever want to look back and wonder how we kicked off session, you're going to find it there. If you missed one last week, you're going to find it there. And then finally, under sign up for alerts, this isn't shown on your screen, but underneath that is a box where you put in your address and it will it'll pre-populate. If you're not already in the system, it will add you to the system. So if you find you're not receiving that news from the Capitol, if that does not look familiar to you, first let us know, we'll double check. If you're not in the system, we will send you that link because it ties everything to your personal home address. So this legislative alert, you'll notice this one says 2023. It's just because that was the best picture I could find. We send them out whenever there is something important. So this one goes back to when they were trying to make changes to steps and healthcare freezes when a contract isn't signed yet. So under law before this, steps and healthcare raises all of that. If the contract wasn't approved before the first contract ended, it would just carry on as is. Under this, those will go into effect even if you haven't negotiated a new budget. So those will go out, those go up on our website. When we send those, it's because something is happening right now. It will say, like this one says, this week, or today, or tomorrow. And when you click that take action button, it pre-populates you into the system. You will see our talking points that you can use in an email. You just simply slide them across into the email. The email is already formatted for you. It has your rep's name in it, their email address, and your name and address at the bottom. All you have to do is take our talking points, personalize them, and hit send. You don't have to worry about looking up all the information. It's all there for you. We make it as easy as we can because we want you to take action on these things. We want you to share your stories. Know who your representatives and your senators are and share your stories about your district, all of them. They don't hear a lot of good news, and that's one of the best ways to build a relationship with your rep or senator is something cool happens in your school. Tell them about it or invite them to see it. Too often, all you hear are bad news about public education, and it's our job and your job as your board member to talk about the good and explain the amazing and make sure that people understand what's going on actually in the field. When we send out alerts like this one, we want you to use our talking points, but we want you to talk about how does this affect my kids? How does this affect the classroom? How does this affect my district? Because that's what really changes minds. When I talk to them about this could happen across the state, they're like, great, Jen, good to hear from you. But when you call and say, this is how it will affect this school district in your district, that's different. That's a personal tie to constituents you both represent. And to always remember that you're both elected officials. And many times you represent more people than your state rep or state senator does, just because of the size of your district. So they don't want to upset another elected official, and they certainly don't want to ignore them to the detriment of their own reputation, because you have that bully pulpit of your school board meetings to say, I contacted our state senator about this and never heard back. Nobody wants that because now the whole community has heard that they're non-responsive. So keep that in mind and use those direct impact, direct facts about how this is really going to affect the district when you're talking with your state rep and senator. As I mentioned, we send these alerts, we make them as easy as we can. And then one of the most powerful sentences in the English language is thank you. And if you think about, I know many of you are, here are new members, so you haven't been around on the board for a while, but think about, have you been thanked yet? Ask your fellow board members, how many times have they been thanked for being a board member by the average person? And that's the same thing the legislators feel. They get called when somebody's angry. They get called when they vote the opposite way that somebody wanted them to vote. They don't get called when they supported something you wanted them to, or they followed through on something they said they would do. And that simple thank you puts you in a different spot than the constituent who only calls when they're complaining. Because it shows you're paying attention. It shows you do appreciate when they do the right thing. So maybe they'll listen a little more when you call them to stop them from doing the wrong thing. So thank you is such a powerful phrase. So we hold these three, well, we don't hold them all. Let me start over. 3 events that allow you to get involved and they give you a very easy way to get involved. Views from the Capitol, the easiest. This is a webinar. All you have to do is watch it from your computer. We do this at least 3 times a year. We do it after State of the State to cover what the governor said in the State of the State, what we expect to see during the year, and then take any questions about any of that. We hold it after the budget is signed, so that's generally the end of June, beginning of July. We hold that in conjunction with the school business officials because they will go through the numbers in detail and I will go through the policy that we've seen. And between the 2 of us, we cover most of the budget. Again, we always leave time for questions. And then the 3rd time we will do is in November, just before the lame duck session, to say, here's what we've seen so far, and here's what we expect over the last 4-6 weeks of session. If something else comes up, if something important comes up, we'll hold another one, but we always hold those 3. Then the behind the scenes at the Capitol is an annual event. We hold it in the spring and we've been holding one in the fall. We're looking at that. We've had issues with that one, let's just say, but in the spring for sure, because it's budget season. We hold that half-day event in Lansing. The one that we have on May 7th will include a budget update from the House Fiscal Agency, which is a nonpartisan agency that deals with all the numbers and all the budgets. It's going to include a federal update from the National School Board Association's government relations people, because there's been so much going on there. We thought it'd be good to hear from them too. We also have a legislative panel where we are inviting the chairs of the education committees and the K-12 appropriations committees. And then we're going to have an update on road funding and its effect on school aid funds and where we think that's going and where we think that's at. At the end of the day, we hold a lunch where we invite all the legislators for the people who are attending. And that gives you a chance to meet with their staff or to meet with them or to network with other school board members from across the state. So it's just a half day. It's an 8 to 1 o'clock, but it's full of good information and a chance for you to come to Lansing and meet with your elected officials or their staff. And then the final one listed on here is NSBA's Advocacy and Equity Institute. And Michigan has been repeatedly the state with the largest delegation out there. Last year, New York tried to give us a run for their money. They sent 60, we sent 93, 95, something like that. So they're trying, but they're just not as good as Michigan. This event in DC is held by NSBA. It's a 2-day conference, and then the 3rd day is a Hill Day. MASB hosts a welcome event to bring all of the Michigan delegates together, talk about the weekend, about the Hill Day. We'll take those federal talking points and boil them down to state level talking points. And then on the Hill Day, we hold a Senate breakfast. We sponsor that breakfast, so it's free to all attendees. And we invite our senators to come talk to the group. They always make time for us. It's wonderful. They generally give us 20 to 30 minutes each. And they will come in and talk about what they see that's going on. They'll take your questions. They'll talk about some of their priorities. So we do that on Tuesday morning, and then you can go off and meet with your representatives. So all 3 of those are a chance to get involved or to get up to date without having to read the newsletter every week, which, I mean, it's fascinating. You really should. So that's in a nutshell what your government relations team does. Here's all of our contact information. We are always available. We love answering questions. Anything we can do to help, let us know. Are there any questions right now? And please check out the links that Larissa's been putting in the chat, the different things I've referenced. She's put all those links up there for you. Dawn, that's a fun question, a fun comment. I know it's not a question, but I have no idea what I'm doing. I would invite you to take 108. That is a start to all of this, or attend some of the events that we have. If you've never been involved in politics or the legislature, it can seem super overwhelming, but it's not. And we are happy to walk you through it. We are happy to get you involved and answer any questions and make you an advocate and the strongest advocate we can. So look for those ideas. I know being a new board member, you've got a lot on your plate right now. And the start of this legislative session, especially federally, has not been easy or coherent. So know that we're here for you to help. Is MASB going to weigh in on the state superintendent? No. The state board hires the state superintendent just like you do. So they will hire a firm. I do believe we may put in a bid for that. But they will go through the same steps that you would to hire a superintendent. And generally, we do not get involved in that for a couple reasons. One, we're not directly involved with that superintendent's hiring. And two, what if we get behind somebody and they're not the ones picked, and now we've created a relationship we don't want to start with? So we will be closely watching it for sure. If anybody asks our opinion, we'll probably have one. But it won't be something that we are publicly doing. Since Matt Hall was blown through the deadline and the issues going back to the courts, those 9 bills, this has been one of the most fascinating things I've watched in my time. At this point, the last court case, not the most recent, before that, both Representative Hall and Senator Brinks declared victory. The court said, Representative Hall, you have to present them. Senator Brinks, we're not going to make him. The Senate has asked them to make the House do it, and the courts have stayed out of it. They have said through precedent, we don't interfere in the rules of either legislative chamber. Then the House has since passed a resolution calling on the House clerk to only enroll bills that are passed in the 25-26 legislative session. And I think that is his big salvo to say, I'm not doing it. So I won't call 6058 dead completely, but it's definitely on life support. We will continue to watch it just in case it starts to pop up in things. And I do expect the issue to come back. I do expect the public unions to come back and say, we need to fix this. It's really harmful to our members. And we don't disagree. The hard cap is not written well, and it does need changes, but it needs to be reasonable changes that we can all live with, but still help protect our employees. So I don't think you've heard the last of that issue, but hopefully we've heard the last of that bill. This session will be sent out by email and I think posted, we hope by the end of the week. So you should have it by Friday. Oh, Larissa already answered that. There you go. Are there any other questions I can try to answer for you? All right. Well, thank you so much for being a board member. Thank you for joining us today. And if you ever have questions or feel completely overwhelmed by what's going on in those newsletters, feel free to reach out and let us know. Before we leave, I do want Brenda to introduce herself so that you can all see her bright smiling face. So I'm glad she made it before the end. Brenda, will you introduce yourself to everybody, please?
I'm Brenda Pilgrim, and I have a mouthful of Novocaine, so please forgive my slurring. Uh,
I'm sorry.
it's okay. It's okay. My feeling is great now. It's good. I am the Assistant Director of Government Relations, and I have been here a little over a year and a half. Loving my job, loving my time, learning a great deal from Jennifer, and glad that I could be on the tail end of this.
Thanks, Brenda. Sorry you're numb. All right. Well, thank you all. Have a great day, and I hope it gets warmer for everybody.